All right. So we are going to discuss two topics. One is the AI disruption trade, and it has truly been wreaking some serious havoc in the stock market. And we're going to discuss that a little bit. And then we're going to move on to Iran and Trump's approach. And what I say is Trump's legacy is really going to be defined by how he handles Iran. So let's begin with the AI disruption trade. We have seen there's this theme running through the markets that AI is going to essentially disrupt so many different functions of businesses throughout our economy. And we are we first saw it most severely with a sell-off in the software sector. And the concept was that all these services that the software providers give to the business world and give to us as individuals, AI is going to replace them. And at least, if not replace them, at least cut way into their market share and reduce their earnings power. So for the last several weeks, we've seen a lot of the big software companies absolutely get devastated, falling by 20, 30, 40, even 50%. Um, but then that concern began to spread. And some of the big financial companies, such as Morgan Stanley and and Schwab, many of us use Schwab, those stocks took a big hit because the idea is that AI is going to actually take away a lot of market share from from those sectors of the economy. But it didn't stop. It moved to insurance companies. It moved to companies that do tax preparation and accounting services. And companies that provide all sorts of professional data and legal services. Yesterday, it even spread to the transportation sector. And there was an idea that a lot of the functions of trucking and the transportation industry are going to be disrupted. And it's going to cut into their market share. So we're seeing AI disrupt one sector after another. And investors have been scrambling to get out of these stocks, thinking that these stocks, their earnings power is going to be so diminished going forward that, I better get out. I better get out before these stocks drop even more. Now, it's interesting, what sector has stood up to all this and actually done quite well? Well, I guess it's all not all that surprising. Consumer staples. So Coca-Cola, Pepsi, these are companies. AI can't replace Coke and Pepsi, right? You can't eat AI. You can't drink AI. Costco held up well. Walmart held up well. Interestingly, Amazon didn't hold up well. Amazon has gotten hit pretty hard. Um, it's so interesting. For the past 2 years, AI has been treated as an unmitigated good for the economy and for financial markets. So if you owned an AI company like Nvidia, or if you were very overweight AI ETFs, your performance has been absolutely off the charts. And there's no way you could perform well. You couldn't keep up with the broader stock market unless you were heavily invested in technology and AI specifically. But more recently, AI has been viewed as an unmitigated bad. And so AI began to turn down hard. But again, more recently, not only were AI companies turning down because they were going to cannibalize themselves by all this competition between them, but now they're taking down, like we said, software companies and finance companies, even transportation companies, wealth management companies. AI has been taking down everything, or nearly everything. But it doesn't seem to make much sense because we've got this view that AI is going to transform our economy. It's going to do tremendous things like we've never seen before in history, right? The productivity of our companies is going to improve. The earnings power of our companies is going to improve. Our lives are going to improve enormously. But then AI is going to wipe out all these companies that are performing all these services. There's a real contradiction here, right? There's a logic that just doesn't hold up. How are we going to have this incredible economy? Our lives are going to improve so much, yet we're all going to become irrelevant. Every company in America is going to be replaced by AI, but even the AI companies themselves aren't doing well because they're going to cannibalize each other through excessive competition, right? Something does not add up. And in my opinion, we've seen a pretty enormous overreaction. Now, these overreactions can go on for quite a while. They just don't end because I say they should end. It could take some time. Now, I'm encouraged by today's price action. The markets have been sort of all over the place, up and down, wild swings today. But perhaps the fact that we're green, at least for the moment, at 12:11 on early Friday afternoon, perhaps some of this irrationality is easing, and the market's going to realize, you know what? AI actually is a huge positive for the economy. All these companies are not going to end up being destroyed by AI, but they're actually going to harness AI and use it to their advantage. And we're going to end up in a much better place. And you know what? We had it right originally that the earnings power of corporate America is going to really be the huge beneficiary of all this AI, and Americans and global citizens are going to be much better served by AI. So perhaps we're starting to see some rationality set in, but we've definitely been, in the past, couple weeks, and it's gotten more and more irrational. People thinking that, you know what? None of these companies are going to survive. All these companies that we've been buying up and investing, they're all going to be wiped out. AI is going to wipe everyone out, and we're going to look around us, and nothing's going to exist other than a bunch of robots that are cannibalizing our companies. It just doesn't make sense. It's gotten to such an extreme, and I think it's completely overdone. So I don't want to get that much into this topic today. I want to spend much more time on Iran, but that's just a primer, and this is a topic that we probably will return to in the coming weeks, and I'll get more in depth as to why these notions that AI is going to replace everything around us really don't hold up to logic. But now I want to pivot to Iran, which is sort of the center focus of today's discussion. Iran is the major geopolitical hotspot in the world at the moment. And the big question is, how will events in Iran play out in the weeks and months ahead? On a surface level, the way the United States handles Iran will impact oil prices. And that's why, in the immediate term, investors are focused on Iran. It's really all about oil prices. But over the medium and longer term, and much more importantly, the way we handle Iran will impact the Middle East for years to come. And our approach to Iran will have major consequences for the reputation and credibility of the United States today and well into the future. Our allies and our enemies are paying very close attention to what we do in the coming weeks. And the way we deal with Iran matters for our ability to deter other countries from threatening our interests all over the world. The way we handle Iran will matter importantly to the US dollar, and it will matter to our financial markets in general. Why is that? Why does it matter to the dollar, the US dollar, and why does it matter to our financial markets, to our stock market, to our bond market, to even to our real estate market? Why? Why is that? The strength and the credibility of our military is one of America's greatest assets. We've been a superpower for many years. To be a superpower, you need a powerful economy and a powerful military. Those are the two essential tools that a superpower needs. A powerful economy, and you can't have a powerful military if you don't have a powerful economy, right? You just don't have the finances to back a powerful military. Now, it also helps to have high moral standing. Okay. That's a help. That's a boost to be a superpower, but it is not essential. How do we know that it's not essential? Well, all you have to do is know a little bit of history. The Soviet Union was a superpower, but it did not have a high moral standing in the world. China today, right? China is widely seen as a superpower, but they also do not enjoy a high moral standing in the world. Okay, so it's nice to have a high moral standing, but it is certainly not essential. However, as I said, the Soviet Union had a powerful economy back in the day, and they had a very powerful military. China today has at least what many believe to be a very strong economy and a very strong military, and it is seen as a superpower. Now, when did the United States' standing as the sole hegemon, the predominant superpower in the world, when did that begin to diminish? Right? It's an important question because our role as the hegemon, as the predominant superpower in the world, at one point was unrivaled, but then began to diminish and fall off, and China became to be seen as a challenger. When did that process begin? It began with the great financial crisis of 2008. At that moment, our economic supremacy was greatly diminished because our housing sector collapsed, our banking sector nearly collapsed, our economy went into a profound recession, and the strength of our economy was doubted internationally. And we ourselves doubted it. And the capitalist system was questioned. So we no longer were seen as such an economic role model for other countries in the world. And because our economy was spiraling and we didn't recover from that economic crisis very quickly, our politicians made the decision that perhaps it wasn't such a great idea to spend so much on our military. So spending on our military began to decline very significantly. It went, it reached a peak under Ronald Reagan. Military spending was something like 6 to 6.5% of GDP. It began to decline a bit, but then under Obama, it really collapsed and it ultimately dropped to like 3% of GDP. So cut by more than half as a share of our economy. That is a massive, massive cut. And as a consequence, not only did our economic prowess diminish due to the great financial crisis, but our military prowess also began to diminish. Meanwhile, China was stepping on the gasoline in terms of boosting its military. Now, while all this was going on, Americans really began to shift their view on what the U.S., the role of the U.S. military should be in the world. And the problems that we had in the Iraq War, which became quite chaotic, it really left a terrible taste in the mouths of the American public. And we became much more cautious about using military force in the world. And cautious is probably an exaggeration. We became incredibly reluctant to use military power in the world. Meanwhile, China was expanding. It was expanding everywhere and not afraid to flex its military muscle. So, again, it's not to say that the US was no longer a superpower after the 2008 crisis, but China was quickly closing the gap. And we didn't become the sole hegemon in the world, but we transitioned to a world where there were two superpowers, two rivals, challenging one another for supremacy. One was on the ascendancy, which was China, and the other was on the decline, which was America. Now, thanks to very positive GDP growth from 2010 all the way up to 2020, this was a decade of uninterrupted economic expansion. Uh, our economy got back on solid footing. Then we ran into the COVID crisis, which every country in the world ran into in 2020. So the whole world was in a recession, but we bounced back from that recession better and faster than any other country in the world. And again, that's not even close. And it speaks to the resilience of corporate America. And it actually, even though so many people will criticize our economic policy during COVID and in the aftermath of COVID, the reality is our policymakers handled COVID, at least initially, extremely well. They were very quick to cut interest rates to zero, very quick for the Fed to start supporting our financial system, putting a ton of cash into the financial system. Our government did absolutely the right thing. Actually, it was President Trump who was president initially during COVID. They increased spending dramatically, which was absolutely the right decision because otherwise we would have had a repeat of the Great Depression of going back all the way to 1929. So because they were so efficient and quick in their response, and because corporate America is so resilient, we really had this remarkably fast economic recovery, the fastest recovery in the world. And the truth is, even though we had this big inflation spike, which people are still angry about, and rightfully so, we probably kept the stimulus in place for too long. Um, our economy has again, once again, led the world from COVID recovery until today. And again, we had a decade from 2010 to 2020 of uninterrupted strong growth. And really, following the COVID crisis, which only lasted a few months, we've had strong economic growth that's lasted right until the present. And once again, we are the preeminent economy in the world. What about militarily? Well, militarily, we still have some questions. But we have certainly shown off our military prowess recently. If you go back to 2025, in June of last year, during the 12-day war, the United States punctuated the end of the 12-day war with this incredibly impressive strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, right? We didn't lose any aircraft, we didn't lose any pilots. So that was really a show of our sophistication. And then in January of this year, in our operation to extract Maduro from Venezuela, again, another impressive show of our military sophistication. But as I've said in the past, we really can't call these two sophisticated operations serious military tests, right? The Israel had done all the hard work. to clear Iran. Israel wiped out their defensive capabilities. They couldn't shoot down any of our sophisticated airplanes because they all their defensive missile systems were wiped out by Israel. So it wasn't an incredibly difficult enemy that we were fighting against. The same thing in Venezuela. We've talked about this. They were not a serious military, never fighting a war. Nonetheless, it was an impressive achievement. I don't want to diminish it, but we were not facing dangerous enemies. This brings us to today. And I've mentioned the United States is clearly the preeminent economic power in the world. Are we the preeminent military power in the world? Well, right now, Trump appears to be a little bit afraid of using our military force. He doesn't seem to be all that confident that we can deliver a devastating blow to the Iranian regime and its military. How do we know that he's hesitating and concerned? Well, he's negotiating. He's negotiating. At least for now, he's negotiating. And if he were supremely confident, perhaps he wouldn't be negotiating. Perhaps he would just be striking Iran relentlessly and finishing the job. So let's talk about these negotiations a minute. And let's try to figure out what is really going on behind the scenes. Let's see if we can clarify some things that maybe are blurred by the media. We don't really have a clear understanding of what Trump is trying to achieve, what's his ultimate objectives. Let's dig into this as we explore this idea of, is the United States going to recapture its reputation as not only the preeminent economic power, but also might we recapture our reputation as being the predominant, preeminent military power in the world? So the stated objective for these negotiations, according to the Trump administration, are fourfold. There are four key goals that Trump apparently wants to achieve. Number one, Iran must end their nuclear ambitions. Okay, that's the first stated goal. The second stated goal of these negotiations is Iran must end its ballistic missile program. Third, Iran must end its support for its proxies throughout the Middle East, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas, which it continues to give them, even though Hamas is in deep trouble, they continue to support Hamas. They're supporting the Houthis in Yemen, as well as funding many other smaller terrorist organizations in the Middle East and throughout the world. So that's the third objective. And the fourth objective of these negotiations is to force Iran to stop oppressing and killing their own population. Well, so far, how has Iran responded to these demands from the president? Well, what we can ascertain from their public statements and leaks that come out from well-sourced people who know the nitty-gritty of what's going on in these negotiations, there has been no major change from Iran. They are willing to negotiate, but they are not willing to end their nuclear goals. They are not willing to end their ballistic missile program. They are not willing to end their support to their proxies. And they will not discuss anything related to humanitarian issues, anything related to social uprisings, the way they've dealt with them, their executions, their assassinations. They just won't discuss it. Not up for negotiation. So what are these negotiations all about? What are they willing to discuss? Well, they are willing to discuss uranium enrichment, but only to a certain degree. You need uranium enrichment to create nuclear weapons. They're willing to discuss uranium enrichment, but again, to a limited extent. which really means they're willing to slow down their pursuit of military weapons, but not end their pursuit of military weapons. And this is exactly what we've been hearing from Iran for the last 10 years. Okay, this is what they were negotiating with the Obama administration: uranium enrichment and the speed with which they will enrich. So there's nothing new in what the Iranians are offering. It's the exact same offer they made to Obama that Obama accepted in 2016 with the nuclear deal. And that nuclear deal is the very reason why we have reached this point with Iran that we've reached over the last 3 years, which is Iran doesn't abide by any agreements. Iran continued to march towards nuclear weapons. They continued to expand their ballistic missile program, and they became the most dangerous country in the Middle East and one of the most dangerous countries in the world until the 12-day war, when Israel and finally the United States weakened them pretty significantly. So it's clear that Iran will not make concessions, which raises a question. What is going on with the Iranians? Don't they understand that they are severely outgunned against the United States and Israel? Didn't they learn anything from the 12-day war? Right? Their decision making here seems to make no sense. Well, let's try to make sense of it. There are two explanations for Iran's decision making and why they are not caving in to any of the demands that Trump is making and why they are basically offering up nothing. So here are the two explanations, as far as I can tell. First, the Iranians truly believe that Allah is behind them, God. They believe that Allah will ensure that they will ultimately succeed. You see, according to their view of the world, God has a plan. And the plan is that Islam will eventually take over the world. Allah is willing a victory for them. It's going to happen. And therefore, the Iranians will fight this out to the end. And they know they're going to win. They know it may be difficult, it may be painful, but this is jihad. And what does jihad mean? Jihad means struggle. Struggles are not easy. This is a faith-based religion, as all religions are, they're faith-based. But this is their explanation. It's going to be a struggle, but Allah has their back and they are going to win. So that's the faith-based religious explanation. But there's another explanation, a second explanation, that is geopolitical and strategic. And it goes like this. If the Iranians accept the four demands made by the Trump administration, that is giving up their nuclear weapons, giving up ballistic missiles, giving up support to their proxies, and end repression domestically, if they cave into those U.S. demands, then they will be surrendering to the United States. And this would be not only a humiliation in front of the Arab world, but a humiliation in front of the entire world. For an Arab nation, a Muslim nation, not an Arab nation, that was wrong, a Muslim nation, for a Muslim nation to surrender to a non-Muslim nation, what greater affront, what greater humiliation? There isn't one. It would be an acceptance of defeat. Muslims being defeated by Christians and Jews, nothing worse. It's unacceptable. On top of that, if they accepted these conditions, then the Iranian regime would no longer be who they are, which is an Islamic republic. They would no longer be an Islamic republic. They would have bowed down to a non-Islamic country. Therefore, it is better to fight and survive than to cave into the United States. But they do believe they can survive, right? They do not think this is a suicidal mission. And why is it that they believe they can survive? Why is that? Right? They shouldn't, again, they're completely outgunned by the United States and Israel. They should have no chance of survival. Well, the reason they believe they can survive, they look at recent historical evidence. Number one, they survived the 12-day war, right, from last June. Trump made all sorts of threats. We're going to destroy them. We're going to this, we're going to that. But guess what? The Trump administration came in for a quick strike. They took out their nuclear capabilities. Israel wanted to go back and do more, but Trump said, no, stop bombing. So they survived. So that's a concrete piece of evidence. Trump said he was going to destroy us, and here we are. He may have hurt us, but we're standing, and because we're standing, we won. That's a victory. Second piece of tangible evidence that they have to support their view that they're going to survive. These huge protests, these uprisings. What did Trump say? He said, I'm coming to rescue you. Don't give up. Take the names of the people who are killing you. Help is on the way. But no help came. And the Iranian regime survived. Trump made a lot of threats, but the regime is still standing. That's the second piece of evidence. Number three, they look at the Houthis in Yemen. And I don't know if you remember this, but last year, the Houthis had been disrupting trade through the Red Sea area. And this is a key transit area for oil and many other products to go through. And what did Trump say? He said, you better stop. Otherwise, we are going to wreak havoc on you. We're going to bring massive destruction to the Houthis. And Trump did attack. He sent in our Air Force and they bombed for a period of days. And then Trump said enough and he walked away. And the Houthis continued to disrupt trade in that area. So the Iranians look at that and say, see, Trump walked away. Yes, the Houthis took a pounding, but it didn't last very long and they survived. So there you have some important data points that the Iranians can point to and say, look, we will survive. We will survive. It's a little bit like this. I don't know if any of you are boxing fans. Maybe you remember the famous fight between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman. It was known as the Thrilla in Manila. And Muhammad Ali had a strategy. His strategy was he was going to do the rope-a-dope, right? He just covered up like this and he absorbed George Foreman's blows round after round after round. He absorbed the punishment, he absorbed the punishment, he absorbed the punishment. And George Foreman threw everything he had at Muhammad Ali. And towards the very end of the fight, George Foreman was completely exhausted. His arms were heavy. He couldn't even hold up his hands to protect himself anymore. And then Ali stepped up and let it rip. And he pounded George Foreman mercilessly and he knocked him out. And Muhammad Ali won the fight. The Thrilla in Manila. This is essentially what Iran thinks they're doing to America. The rope-a-dope. They think they can absorb the blows of America, but America will exhaust itself. And let's talk about that. How will America exhaust itself? Well, the Iranians are very smart. Never, never think they're stupid. They are very smart. They understand the US political system. They know the American public. They know how US politicians react to the American people, especially in an election year. And this year we have midterm elections in November. The Iranians also No Tucker Carlson. They hear him and they know that he has said repeatedly that it's dangerous to use US military abroad. They heard his warnings and warnings of other podcasters as well, such as Steve Bannon and others, that thousands and thousands of American troops would die in Iran last June. Now, it didn't happen, but the Iranians know this is something that Americans are petrified over and very sensitive to. So the bet of the Iranian regime is that, yeah, negotiations are probably going to fail. Of course, they're going to fail. And the US will strike us and they will drop a bunch of bombs on us. But the American public has no appetite for protracted conflict. So Trump is going to look for a quick strike like he did with Iran last June, like he did with the Houthis last year as well. But then the US will cut loose. It will call it quits, just like they have in the past. So Trump will make a lot of big threats. He'll make a lot of noise. He will deliver some big, big blows, but these blows will be survivable. And all Iran needs to do, all the regime needs to do is survive, and that will be a victory. This is their version of the rope-a-dope, Muhammad Ali's rope-a-dope. Will they be right? That's the question. Will they be right? Let's try to examine this question. Will they be right? So, in parallel to these so-called negotiations that have been taking place, the Iranian foreign minister has been flying all over the Middle East. He's been meeting with the leaders of Qatar. He's been meeting with the leaders of Oman, with Saudi Arabia, with the United Arab Emirates. And he's been putting pressure on them. So they will, in turn, put pressure on the Trump administration. He is, the foreign minister of Iran is fear-mongering. He's telling them, if the United States attacks us, this is going to be so bloody. We're going to strike US military assets. We're going to strike you, right? Every single country in the Middle East, we're going to hit them hard. People are going to die. We're going to do massive damage. So they're trying to cause panic throughout the Middle East. So Iran is reading the American public. They're reading the leadership in the Middle East. And the Middle Eastern leaders are afraid, right? The leaders in Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Saudi, they are afraid. They are afraid. Not only are they afraid of being attacked by Iran, but they're also afraid of something else. And this is also what the foreign minister of Iran is talking to them about. He's telling them, imagine if the United States succeeds and they topple the Iranian regime. Imagine the chaos that will ensue. Our population will have just been under attack. Many of our minorities will flee. We have a big Kurdish minority. The Kurds will run to you guys. They'll go to Turkey. They'll go to other countries with large Kurdish minorities, and that will create upheaval in your countries, right? That's one scenario. Another scenario is that we are replaced, right? This regime is placed with a pro-Western regime. And imagine if that Iran becomes a democracy. What a threat that will be to you. Imagine if there's a thriving democracy in Iran. What do you think your domestic populations will do? Nothing could be worse for stability of your regimes if we become a democracy. So they're telling them we're going to attack you. The Iranians are explaining to them, what if the United States actually succeeds and Iran is transformed into a Western-looking country? What could be worse for you? So what are the Middle Eastern countries doing? They're running to the Trump administration, telling them, do not attack. This is dangerous, right? We will get hit hard, and you will get hit hard. They're doing their best to cause people inside the Trump administration to turn against a strike against Iran. So now we know Iran's thought process and their strategy. They will give Trump nothing in the negotiations, right? They believe Allah is with them, and they believe Trump will not have the stamina to finish the job. They believe that if Trump does strike, the strikes will hurt, but they will not be lethal to the regime. The regime will survive. And the Iranians are traveling all around the Middle East, sending a message to these other Middle Eastern countries how painful it will be if the United States enters into a protracted war against Iran. They are doing their best effort to increase the chances that if Trump does strike, it will be quick and then he'll exit. He'll say he did something. I did something. I hit them hard, and he'll brag about it. How no other country in the world could have done this, and no other president in the world, no other president in U.S. history has ever done this. I did it. He'll claim a huge victory, but at the end of the day, the Iranian regime will survive, and it will be a great victory. That's their goal here. And again, as I also said, they understand that there are midterm elections coming in the United States, and Trump does not want a protracted conflict that could undermine the chances of the Republicans in these elections. So, what will Trump decide, right? We still haven't answered that question. What will Trump decide? This is interesting. J.D. Vance, just a few days ago, said the issue in Iran has always been Iran's nuclear enrichment and preventing Iran from becoming a nuclear bomb. And all these other three issues, that was the first issue, but the other three issues are secondary. That's what J.D. Vance said. Those are essentially his words. But that's strange because according to Trump, in June of 2025, the United States and Israel destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities. So J.D. Vance is contradicting the president. So what's really going on? Does J.D. Vance just have a different agenda than the president? And the president wants to achieve four objectives, and J.D. Vance is happy just to achieve the first objective? Does that make sense? Maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe the truth is that these are just make-believe negotiations. And we're really putting the final pieces in place, coordinating with our allies, most importantly, coordinating with Israel. There is a lot going on behind the scenes. I think America is waiting for the right opportunity, and they know Iran will never compromise on these key issues. And the only way to resolve these four issues is truly, truly regime change. Now, I heard a very well-known um, podcaster named Hugh Hewitt. He said something that I agree with. He said, Trump has two doors in front of him. One door is the Ronald Reagan door. He can go through that door, right? Ronald Reagan is the one who really is credited for bringing down the Soviet Union. And the other door is the Jimmy Carter, Barack Obama, Joe Biden door. That door is appease our enemies. Be short-term thinking. Pretend problems go away by not dealing with them. Do fake negotiations. Those are the two doors. Which one will he walk through? So I heard a discussion with a former rear admiral of the Navy. His name is Mark Montgomery. And he said some interesting things, which I want to share with you. He said that there is one carrier strike group in the region right now. That's the Lincoln. There's another carrier strike group that should arrive any day. Now, it takes 2 weeks for a carrier strike group, once it's arrived to its destination. It takes 2 weeks for it to establish a battle rhythm, right? They practice, they do sorties, uh, all sorts of exercises to prepare for battle. That takes about 2 weeks. So the Lincoln arrived about 2 weeks ago. So now the Lincoln is finally prepared to strike. But the second carrier strike group didn't arrive quite yet. Now, something interesting to note. Ramadan, which is a Muslim holiday, it's their most important holiday. It lasts for a month. It begins on the evening of February 17th, and it lasts until March 19th, so it's about a month. The odds that the United States would strike Iran during their most important religious holiday, it's pretty low. I don't know if any of you remember, but last year, Israel, in their war against Hamas, they paused the war for a month during Ramadan. Okay. The, the West is very sensitive about waging war during holy periods out of respect. Okay. Not out of respect for the Iranian regime, but out of respect for, the Muslim world. And the United States may not want to be seen as killing during a holy period for Muslims. So if we are going to strike, it would in all likelihood be before February 17th. Now that doesn't give us too many days because today's February 13th. And the second carrier strike group hasn't even arrived yet. Now, just yesterday, Trump was asked a question, how long will you give negotiations to work? How much patience are you going to have? His answer was really interesting. Once you understand the Ramadan calendar, February 17th to March 19th, you'll be struck by his answer. He said, I'm willing to give negotiations about a month. Okay, so about a month takes us to the end of Ramadan. So keep that in mind. If we're going to strike, in all likelihood, the real window to begin starts after Ramadan, March 19th, from March 19th on. Now, here's another important piece of data to share with you. These carrier strike groups, they can stay in place for about 3 months. After about 3 months, they need to be changed. Why is that? Because they're constantly training, they're doing operations, the equipment's being used. They're not sitting there idle. They're doing things, they're working. The sailors are working. They like to, for peak performance, you don't want to keep them on beyond 3 months. So this gives us a window. If really the clock starts now, it really gives us to the mid to end April. So the window for striking Iran, in all likelihood, is sometime after March 19th and mid-April. So if we're going to see a major strike on Iran, that's our window in all likelihood. All right. I want to turn to Prime Minister Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, his visit to Washington, D.C. yesterday. I'm still working on answering this question. What is Trump going to do? Why did Netanyahu do an emergency visit to Washington, D.C.? Why did he do that? It's interesting. The media is focused on, you know what, things between Netanyahu and Trump, they don't look so good. Netanyahu is clearly very nervous. Then they always give a press conference after they meet. They met for 3 hours and there was no press conference. They always stand together and answer questions together. There's something going on, the media says. This meeting didn't go well. There's a strained relationship here. Let's try to understand. Is the media right? By the way, the media always says this, right? Things between Trump and Netanyahu, not good. If we've talked about the national security document, their national security document, which really outlines the strategy of the U.S. In the coming years, right? What is our geopolitical strategy, our military strategy? What did it say regarding the Middle East and Israel? It essentially said this: Israel, and it said it in a very subtle way, a very subtle way. Israel is the ideal ally. There's essentially one country in the world that can carry its own weight in its region, and that's Israel. Israel is critical for our intelligence efforts, right? We could never gather the intelligence that we gather if it weren't for Israel. Israel has incredibly offensive and defensive military capabilities. This is the ideal ally, and we wish we had more allies like Israel. This is a major change from the way US governments have treated Israel in the past. In the past, Israel was always a country that needed to be restrained. They were viewed as somewhat of a problem child. Why a problem child? Because the view was, the incorrect view was that, you know, we wouldn't have problems with the Muslim world if it weren't for Israel, right? If we have to support Israel because it's our moral obligation, but the world would just be more peaceful. The Middle East would be more peaceful. Of course, that was a complete misreading, but the Trump administration understands the value of Israel. That's why. Can you imagine another leader in the world calling up Trump on the telephone and say, "Look, I got to visit you," and President Trump saying, "Yeah, come ASAP. Let's go. Let's meet for as long as you want." That is a special relationship that doesn't exist. He would never just bring in Keir Starmer of the UK, or you name it. You name the leader. This is a unique relationship. So Bibi shows up, Bibi's Netanyahu. They meet for 3 hours and they don't share anything really of substance from what they discussed. Now, Netanyahu shows up with some key members of the Mossad, from the Air Force. Imagine what they were discussing. Also, I've heard that Netanyahu shared some key intelligence about Iran that only Israel possesses. And Netanyahu probably also told Trump, regardless of what you decide to do, if you reach an agreement, we cannot live with Iran developing its ballistic missile system. We have a red line. And once Iran crosses that red line with its ballistic missile capabilities, we're taking care of business. And because Trump has enormous respect for Israel in a way that previous presidents didn't, and because he has enormous respect for Netanyahu as an incredible geopolitical strategist in his own right, Trump listens. And it's clear, if the United States doesn't have the stomach to take care of the Iranian threat, Israel will. Now, Trump has domestic politics to worry about, right? He needs to show he's giving negotiations a chance. This is why I think he's negotiating. He understands that there are midterm elections coming up. He understands that people listen to the Tucker Carlson, and that is, like it or not, an important wing among Republican voters. He needs to show that he's giving negotiations a chance. He needs to justify his actions if he does strike very aggressively. So, to conclude, I think Trump understands what he's doing. I think negotiations are a game here that he needs to play for domestic politics. At this point, I also think he's buying time. He's not going to strike during Ramadan. He's waiting for the second strike group to enter the region. We were not prepared. Trump was not prepared. He didn't expect these protests to go the way they did. If he had understood that, if he had perfect foresight, he would have been prepared and had both carrier strike groups in place to strike earlier. But we were not prepared. We've talked about that in the past. We do not have the type of military capabilities that we really need to function in multiple regions in the world simultaneously. We're just not there. We need to be. We need to step up military spending. In the 2027 budget, uh, Trump plans to increase military spending pretty dramatically to get us where we need to be. But that's not where we are today. So he's buying time for various reasons. The question is, will Trump go for regime change? And I suspect on that question, he's going to try to do as much damage to the regime as possible and then try to hand this off to the domestic population and hope they join in with massive, massive uprisings and they participate in pushing the regime over the edge. And the combined effort of the US and Israel striking from the outside and an uprisings from the inside ultimately gets the job done of a regime change. All right, that's it. Questions, comments?